Okay, I think we're live and sound should be good. I did test it on my system, have a way to do that. Um, so I did have had to change it up a little bit for my chat with Jeff Carr earlier today. So you should be hearing me without any problems. Send me a note if you aren't, but I was able to hear the feed. So I'm going to move along and get into tonight's class. That is what I titled uh, Reflections of an Odd Man. That should be Old Man. I put that title up there on this slide primarily for Travis, who read my title, Reflections of an Old Man, as an odd man initially. But that probably would work as well. So it actually is not reflections of mine, because obviously I'm not an old man, at least from my perspective. From some of your perspective, I might be really old. From some of you, I might be pretty young still. So it all kind of depends upon your perspective. But I want to get the reflections of an old man in Ecclesiastes, because that's what the book of Ecclesiastes essentially is. We generally think, I should say historians and the Jews all thought, that it was primarily the work of Solomon near the end of his life, as he considered everything that he had done and everything he had pursued, both in wisdom and in building and in wives and everything that he kind of did in really grand scale. And that this book is primarily him trying to talk to younger people about things he's learned through life that could help them in life. That he kind of, maybe he had them when he was young, maybe he didn't, but he would like young people, especially you see at the end of the book, the end of chapter 11, beginning of chapter 12, where he's really urging young people to seek God, to have a desire and love for God early, because that will help you through the treadmill that life essentially is on this planet. And so I'm going to read a couple of things. I'm going to read through most of chapter 1 tonight. And I want to read a little bit of some introduction from the New Bible Commentary about the book as just kind of an introduction to the first chapter. It says, Ecclesiastes contains reflections of an old man, the preacher, puts in quotes, as he considered the question of meaning in life. He looked back and saw the futility, or vanity, of chasing after even the good things this life can offer, including wisdom, work, pleasure, and wealth. Even if such things are satisfying for a time, death is certain to end this satisfaction. In fact, God's judgment on Adam for his sin echoes throughout the book, especially in 12 verse 7. Yet the person who lives in the fear of the Lord can enjoy God's good gifts. Young people especially should remember their Creator while they still have their whole lives before them. Traditionally, interpreters of Ecclesiastes have identified the preacher, who is also called the son of David, king in Jerusalem, as Solomon. Now, this word preacher means primarily the speaker of the assembly for Jews. So whenever they had assemblies, whenever they had the whole congregation of Israel gathered together, this was the one getting up there and speaking to everybody. And so that is the primary image of the book of Ecclesiastes from Solomon's perspective. He's the preacher, and he is standing up there in front of all the congregation of God's people, and he is espousing his God-given wisdom and reflections on everything he learned going through life. And both the good and the bad. And he seeks after some bad stuff. He seeks after good things. But the reality is that all of it comes to an end for every one of us. Every one of us has kind of ups and downs throughout life. I was actually reading something pretty interesting yesterday about happiness and knowledge and intelligence. And this professor was describing intelligence, a few different types of intelligences. Some intelligence, like just the ability for our brain to process quickly brand new problems, that actually peaks probably in our 20s. But the reality is in our 20s, when we have the greatest, processing power of our brain, we don't really have all the wisdom input. And so I was taking their, ideas and I was putting them into my own kind of analogies. And it sounded to me a lot like a computer, brand new computer you buy. And you know how when you buy, especially a Windows computer, and when you first turn it on, you first buy it, it's just, fast and clean. Everything, it starts up quick, shuts down quick, everything goes quick. And then the more and more you put in it, the more and more it gets bogged down. Now it's like, oh, that's Windows machines, that's Windows, software. But that really is human. That is the reality of human life. And so they were talking about different types of intelligence, especially that which comes from experience, which is what Solomon is talking about, that actually peaks really in our 60s. That our ability and knowledge and crystallized understanding and wisdom is all loaded in there. Our brains might not work quite as quickly on brand new problems, but part of that is just it's going through a lot of old examples to figure out, is this what I've seen before? When you're young, you don't really do that. You just kind of, a lot of things are new and you just kind of take new stuff and you go with it. And so when we're young and we have those advantages of youth, and he talks about that a little bit at the end of the book, we want to, though, place that in its proper place with God's wisdom. When you do that, you will have the best life possible for you. We don't know all the situations that will come that will, cause our life to, be in distress or turmoil or sickness like, presently we're doing in lockdown. But when you do that, as a young person, you are going to be able to enjoy all the good things that God has provided for you in this world. There is a lot of difficulty in this world. If there wasn't, we'd all rather be here than in heaven, right? But there is a lot of good to be enjoyed too. And he's telling us when we're young to remember our Creator so that we can put in proper perspective everything we go through, the ups, the downs, the good times, the bad times. Much like Ecclesiastes 3, we will get to probably in a couple of weeks, as we keep doing this probably for a little bit, where there is a time for everything. There's a time for the good, there's a time for the bad. And we have to be able to roll with all of those things. And if we remember our Creator when we're young, we will roll through all of those things much better. So let's kind of get into the beginning parts. And as I said, the very first verse, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. It certainly fits Solomon. And he is, one of the wisest men. God inspired him with God-given wisdom and a miraculous amount such that there really wasn't any wise like him before or after. And so he really gives us the kind of downside of the theme of the book, because there is an upside and downside to this book. There's the good and the bad. The first chapter is focused more on the bad, and so essentially primary statement, the thesis of this book is the second verse. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. All is worthless. And so when you think about the idea of things being worthless, that they really don't have lasting value. They might have short-term value, they might even be good in the moment, but they don't actually stay. They don't actually remain. And so what he's telling us is that life on this planet, it's all futile. We're not going to take any of it with us. And we are all going to die one way or another. We're all going to leave here, and we're going to leave everything that happens here behind us. And that's kind of the overarching theme. Now, he's going to have the exceptions. Yeah, but. And we're going to see those start in chapter 2, and we'll look at that next week, the yeah, but. But everything is essentially futile. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing, doesn't mean we're not supposed to do it. But it's not going to ultimately, none of it, no matter how much you work, no matter how much money you accumulate, no matter how many good things you do, it will never be enough. It will never satisfy for forever. And so that's really the primary focus. Now, as we get into kind of the rest of this, talking about the Speaker of the Assembly, and the very first point here in 1 through 11, I'm going to describe it as life is like running on a never-ending treadmill. So I have a treadmill here off to my side. Frank told me at the Super Bowl when he was here at my house, like, I probably just, hang clothes on it. Said, no, I've had to do some, maintenance to it that you do every 1,000 miles or so. I've actually got thousands of miles on it and do that pretty regularly. Unlike a lot of treadmills. Now, I'm sure some people are getting a little more use of them in the present moment. But I get to turn mine off. When I get tired and I look at my, blood pressure or heartbeat and go, I don't really want to get above 150 today. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to slow it down, or I'm actually going to stop. Maybe if I'm being sick one day, it's like, okay, we're gonna slow that down. Life isn't like that. Can't get off. It's going to keep rolling and it's going to keep going. And there's really nothing we can do to stop that. And that's kind of what I hear when I read through this. I'm going to read the first from verse 3 to 11 now, just to kind of follow along with me. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Now, in that verse, he gives us his perspective. He's looking at all of that work, all of that effort that happens on this planet. And he says, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. There's a never-ending cycle to the sun, to the rain, and to clouds developing, and then raining on the mountains and coming down in streams and back to the ocean. And that precipitation cycle never ends. Now, we should be glad of that because we have to keep drinking water. But an unending cycle. He says, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. Everything gets us tired. Even good things. Sometimes I caution people when they've had a lot of stress that they're going to feel the effects of that within 3 to 6 months. Even when it's good stress. Even when it's, like your birth of a baby, it's like, oh man, it just changes everything, kind of turns life upside down for a little while, but you're just so happy, you're just so joyful. But that doesn't mean 3 to 6 months later, you're just going to be like, oh, because you are. Stress wearies us. All the efforts that we do raising kids or going to work or, mowing our lawns or giving a lesson in front of my computer. Looking at two different images of myself, one that's like a few seconds behind and one that's following me. This is all wearisome to our physical bodies and even our spirit. And he cautions us that even at the end about even the reading of books, even the accumulation of knowledge from books, that actually can weary us as well and get us tired. So everything we do gets us weary. It tires us. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And what he means is the eye never gets tired of seeing stuff. We always want to keep seeing stuff. And our ear wants to keep hearing things. And when you can't see as well, and when you can't hear as well, you miss it, no matter how much you've seen or heard before. And he says, what has been is what will be. And what has been is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, I'm sure a bunch of you have in this present quarantine, pandemic, that worldwide, shut down from a coronavirus that originated in China, have learned that we've had a number of pandemics. One of the most famous is in 1918, the Spanish flu. But I don't know how many realize that we had one in 1968. I was like 5 years old, I guess. Flu killed a number of people. We had one in 1957, I heard. We couldn't do as much about them then. We didn't shut down the whole societies about them then. They don't seem to have been quite as deadly as this particular virus. But we've had other flu pandemics as well, as long with, the swine flu that came out, SARS too, the bird, I guess that was SARS too, the bird flu, and then MERS from the Middle East. There's been a number of things that worried people, Ebola, and some of them incredibly deadly, and they're just, scared to death that they would go all across the planet. But the reason this isn't new is because it's happened a lot before. It's happened throughout history where people have gotten sick and people have died. And there has been crisis that has caused those things. Sometimes they come from hurricanes, earthquakes. They come from war and famine and drought, and all kinds of things affect our lives. There's nothing new under the sun in that regard. He says, is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? Now, I'm sure lots of young people will sit and think of all kinds of new stuff. I've done this a bunch. And the reality is, every time I've made that practice, is that there's new ways, there's new tools, there's new kind of approaches to the same age-old issues of life. We have to keep feeding ourselves, we have to keep drinking, we have to keep working and providing for ourselves, and we create lots of different methods to do those things. But the reality is we still have to keep doing those things. And I can remember, some of you who are old enough can remember the promises of technology. And we're seeing some of the fruits of that now. The ability for me to do this for all of you. But I don't know how many of you remember, and if you're young, kind of ask your, folks or older people. The promise was that we would have to maybe have like 4-day work weeks. Like we'd only have to work like 30 hours a week because technology would take care of it all. But you know what's interesting? I don't find that has happened at all. That the more technology, the more things go, the more we want it to go. And the more, all the technology people, they want them working 50, 60 hours a week. And so the technology has not led to us having an easier life. It's had us a different life. We have certain advantages, some disadvantages, but our tools have changed for what we do and how we live. But nothing has really changed. We still have to interact, and we still have to teach, and we still have to eat, and we still have to do all of those things like we've always had to do them. Now, he says, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I was thinking about this today. In fact, in my conversation with Jeff Carr, he was commenting that the people graduating this year all were born after 9/11. 9/11 changed the world that they grew up in, but it didn't really affect them because they didn't remember it. They weren't here. And this is going to have similar effects. I don't know if it's big, but it'll have some kind of effect on life. And a lot of you, this will be a monumental moment in your life. And you'll look back on it and you'll have stories about it, good and bad. And you'll have all kinds you'll be able to tell all that big boom of children that's going to be born in about 9 months from now. You're going to be able to tell all of those kids when you're in your 40 years old and go, you don't know what it was like living in 2020. Wow, you have it good here in 2040. Because that's just the way of life. And you won't remember, and they won't remember their grandparents or great-great-grandparents. And they won't remember what they went through because that's really the way of the world. And he says, and so I'm kind of ending up there. He says, there's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. And so the people who come later are just not going to remember what we've gone through. And they're going to do the exact same things to us now, who describe what it was like in these circumstances. And they're going to go, wait a second, you're telling me you didn't have to go to work, you didn't have to go to school, you got to stay home and binge watch Netflix all the time. Wow, that sounds like a real rough one. But they won't really know the anxiety that people endured. They won't really understand it. It's like they'll be saying to their older people, like, we say to a lot of older people before us, and we walked to school 2 miles, both ways, uphill both ways, and it was always snowing and a foot of snow and, didn't have enough shoes and all of those stories. That's what they hear because they weren't there. They don't know the struggles people actually endured. And that's what's going to happen again. Just like now, just like people who don't remember 9/11, there are going to be people who don't remember this. And you're going to be that person who says, man, you don't know what it was like. And that's the way of the world. But he starts us off here at the end of chapter 1 with, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Doesn't that actually sound like God has just given us busy work? It almost makes me think that, when he gave the garden to Adam and Eve, and they were going to tend it, by the way, it wasn't a no work kind of garden. They were going to tend the garden, but then he kicked them out and he says, well, now you're going to have a bunch of weeds. So yeah, you're still going to have, some of this stuff, but now you're going to have more of a struggle doing all of it. And so he has given us these things that we have to do. He's not saying we don't have to do this stuff. But he is saying God has given us things that actually can make us unhappy. Yeah, and that's what we'll get to next week. He says, I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and is striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. Now notice that verse 15, when something's just wrong, it can't be set right. And when things are lacking, you can't even count how much is lacking. We would like to have nobody lack anything, but that's not going to happen in this world. There will always be something lacking. He said, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. Now I'm sure a lot of you are very in tune in education, learning, study, as I am. And yet he's telling us that all the things we learn, all the things we study, all the things we do, at some point it's all going to go away. We won't actually, we're going to leave everything that all the wisdom we've had one day will simply be laid aside and nobody will have access to it. Maybe somebody will listen to some videos or some tape, well, probably not tape, but some digital recording somewhere. And maybe they'll hear somebody's wisdom, but not very many, not very much. They're not even going to want to watch it and see it. It's like, oh, that's from 2020s. Wow, are you living in the dark ages? And so the idea that wisdom is an end-all be-all is a foolishness. It's not that it's not good, and he's going to tell us later in the book that it's still better than foolishness. But he tells us here that it has a downside. That not only is it kind of like striving after, you can never fully grasp all that is wisdom. But he says in verse 18, for in much wisdom is much vexation. That's really the idea of grief and struggle. He says, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And so for you and I, hopefully, we understand that there isn't anything, even the good things, that are all-encompassing. The only thing that is all-encompassing is God. And having the fear of God and the respect of God and the love of God and seeking after him is the only thing that will actually see us beyond this planet. So I'm going to end there. I appreciate everybody's coming today. I'm going to say a short prayer and then we'll all sign off. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for your word that it enlightens us and guides us, teaches us, gives us your wisdom, but help us never lose sight of the fact that you are our all in all, that you are the one who has given to us Jesus and the Holy Spirit to not only save us, but to care for us, provide for us, be with us all the time, and to remind us how much you love us. Help us to love you and to love our neighbors as you have loved us. We pray all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.